Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. It's Pride. This is the second in a series of Magic Presents Pride themed commander deck techs. Thanks for joining me. Magic Presents Pride is an event that Wizards of the Coast is running again this year in June. It's the second year they've done it, but this year we have prize support in the form of this cool Chromatic Lantern promo featuring Nico Aris. It will be happening June 27th through 29th. It's only one day in there. That's just the span that you can have it. And it will be happening in one of the following countries. So if your local game store is running a Pride event, great. Hopefully they signed up in time to be able to give you this Chromatic Lantern. And if not, ask them to. Ask them to run it this year, ask them to run it next year. I'm sure that Wizards is going to do it again. But this is a fun event, and even if you don't get promotional support in the form of the Chromatic Lantern, your LGS might give you a different promo. In any case, it's a good time. Again, June 27th through 29th. Ask your FLGS what they're doing for this. But what is the event? Well, it's pretty simple. You build a commander deck, and when you do, you treat all eligible commanders as though they had partner, because anyone can be with anyone. So there are plenty of different cool options you can build with this. You can't get more than 2 commanders with things like the partner with ability or choose a background, friends forever, doctor's companion, any of that. Just stick with the 2. But even with that, you can go pretty wild. So that's what we're doing this month. I've already showcased the U-Haul featuring Greasefang and Shorikai. And so today we're going to go for our next one, which is OnlyFriends, featuring Kambal, Console of Allocation, and Ruric, Thar, the Unbowed. So before we get into it, I'm going to give you a little rundown on how I break down commander decks and how I build them. I like to build around the commander, so rather than having just a synergistic deck and a really powerful piece in the command zone, or a deck that works with just a commander that lets you play those colors, I want to showcase what's in my command zone, whether it's 1 or 2 commanders, and build around them. I like to go with the flavor of it. I like to try and make something that makes this card or cards really shine. So generally, I will break my deck into 3 pieces. The first is about 30 cards, or generally, I might try to get to 30 cards, but about 30 cards of my game plan. These are the things the deck is trying to do. And of course, the commanders support that, or commanders support that. The next third is another 30 cards that I've broken into 3 pieces, all for support. I've got about 10 pieces of card advantage, 10 pieces of ramp, and 10 pieces of non-mass removal. Generally just like single target kill spells. I will usually do 1 or 2 wraths. Sometimes I don't do any if this deck doesn't have any wraths. Sometimes I do more, depending on what the deck is trying to do. And then I do 38 lands, because I like to hit my land drops and I like to cast my spells. So again, 30 cards in the game plan, 30 cards of support between card advantage, ramp, and removal or interaction, 1 or 2 wraths usually, and then 38 lands. So let's talk about our commanders here. Kambal, Console of Allocation, originally from Kaladesh, is a 2/3 human advisor for 1, a white, and a black. He says, whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, that player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So Kambal doesn't hurt us, does punish our opponents for doing things that they're probably going to be doing anyway, and gives us a little value on top of it. Ruric Thar, the Unbowed, is a 6/6 Ogre Warrior for 4, a red, and a green, with Vigilance and Reach. Rubric Thar, the Unbowed, attacks each combat if able, and whenever a player, that includes their controller, casts a non-creature spell, Rubric Thar deals 6 damage to that player. So when your opponents cast a non-creature spell, Rubric Thar will do 6 damage to them, and Kambal will make them lose 2 life, so they're going to lose a total of 8 life. And then you gain 2 life. Unfortunately, when we cast any non-creature spells, Ruric Thar will do 6 damage to us. And Ruric Thar has to attack every combat. Yeah, I know it sounds like both of those are disadvantages, but I think we can build around them. Especially because Ruric Thar has to attack, but they have Vigilance, so we don't have to worry about them not being able to block or being put in too much of a dangerous position. And they have Reach, so that lets them block all the time. So let's get into our game plan. What is the deck actually trying to do? We have this split between two ideas. The first is because we can only we get punished if we play non-creature spells, and Ruric Thar is sort of the commander we're leaning on since Kambal is more of a support. We're running 54 different creatures, including the commanders. That's an awful lot for our for a commander deck. We actually only have, I think, 8 non-creature spells in this deck. So that's not that many. And each one of them is going to harm us, but several of them are going to keep us from suffering too much from that harm. We'll get into what they are in just a moment. But the point being, because our commanders don't like non-creature spells, we're running over 50 creatures. We have OnlyFriends. So we were trying to get a lot of advantages from playing creatures and playing creatures that care about us playing other creatures, and just accruing a lot of value from that. In addition, we want to take advantage of both commanders' punishment triggers and from Ruric Thar's mandatory attacks. So those are what we're trying to do. Get value from creatures entering the battlefield and creatures being on the battlefield, and then get value from these punishment triggers and Ruric Thar attacking. So let's start with our game plan of Creaturefall. Creaturefall is not an actual game term, but it just means here's what happens when a creature comes into play. We're going to start with a simple one. It's Guide of Souls. Guide of Souls is a 1/2 human cleric that says whenever another creature enters under our control, we gain a life and we gain an energy. Guide of Souls is a good soul sister, so it's going to get us a life gain, which we may care about if we are either taking damage from our own Ruric Thar, or if people are attacking us because our commanders are triggering and they're not having a good time because of it. In addition, Guide of Souls says whenever we attack, we can pay 3 energy to put 2 1/1 counters and a flying counter on one of our attacking creatures, and it also becomes an angel. So that's a great way to give Ruric Thar flying and make them an 8/8. But we can do it multiple times, and we're going to be playing mostly creatures, so we're going to be getting a lot of energy. Guide of Souls is a good time in this deck for that reason. Also, it's our cheapest one. Hey. We have an Agate an Agate Instigator. For 1 and a red, it's a 1/3 Lizard Rogue with Offspring for 1 and a red. So we play it for 2, and it says whenever another creature we control enters, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. So it's Impact Tremors on a body. If we pay twice as much for it, we get an additional Agate Instigator but it's a 1/1 in the form of its Offspring token. So double Impact Tremors. Seems pretty good to me. This is one of our more expensive cards in the deck, but don't worry, as usual, this Moxfield page, which will be linked in the description, has a lot of other options you can go into in the considering section. Ella's Ilkor, Sadistic Pilgrim, is a 2/2 cleric with Death Touch for a white and a black, and it just says whenever another creature enters under our control, we get a life, and when another creature we control dies, our opponents lose a life. So this is another way of us gaining life. It's another way of just having of punishing our opponents for interacting with our creatures. Gallic Readers is 1 and a green for a 1/1 Elf Druid that just says Alliance. Alliance just means Creaturefall. It's when something enters under our control. When that happens, only one of each of these 3 things happen per turn, because you have to choose one you haven't chosen already. Gallic Readers will get a 1/1 counter, we'll make a tapped treasure, or we'll gain 2 life. So a little bit more life gain, a slower way of ramping, and Gallic Readers can also get big, even if we have already done the other 2. Sharp-Eyed Rookie has essentially Evolve. It's a 2-mana 2/2 with Vigilance. When a creature enters on our side, if its power is higher than Sharp-Eyed Rookie, or its toughness is higher than Sharp-Eyed Rookie, the rookie gets a 1/1 counter, and we investigate. So we make a clue, which it's not like drawing a card, but it might as well be like drawing a card. Commander doesn't go that fast, and we have plenty of mana to use for that. Champion of Lamholt is one of our most dangerous cards. For 1 and 2 green, we get a 1/1 that says whenever another creature enters under our control, this gets a 1/1 counter. And creatures with power less than Champion of Lambholt's power can't block our creatures. So as long as our Champion of Lambholt's power is greater than anyone else's power, any other creature's power, any blocking or potentially blocking creature's power, our stuff is just unblockable. And what is our stuff? Sometimes it's just Ruric Thar, and that's enough. So Champion of Lambholt is a great evasion piece, but also protects our commander because it makes them unblockable. Molten Gatekeeper is a 3-mana 2/3 artifact golem, and it's impact tremors again. When we have Creaturefall, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. We can also unearth it for just 1 red, which means it comes back to the battlefield, it gains haste, and then we exile it at the next end step or whenever it would otherwise leave the battlefield. We don't have any flickering in this deck to do tricks with that, I don't believe. So it's really just if we need to get it to come back. But we can bring it back as the first creature we cast that turn. It will trigger any other Creaturefall that we have on board. And then we play any other creatures we want, triggering it. Then we attack with it, and maybe we get some damage. And otherwise, it just goes away anyway, so we might as well swing in. Outcaster Trailblazer, I really like this card, especially in the current standard. For 3 mana, we get a 4/2 that when it enters, we add 1 mana of any color, so we get a little rebate. And it gives us the trigger of Garruk's Uprising or similar cards. When we have Creaturefall with Ferocious, so when a creature with power 4 or greater enters under our control, we draw a card. Outcaster Trailblazer is going to give us a lot of value in this deck, especially in the form of that card draw. But you can also plot this. So plot means you pay the plot cost, 2 and a green, to exile it, and then as a sorcery on a later turn, you can cast it for free. So the idea is maybe it's turn 3, and you can plot this, so put it into exile, and then on turn 4, you cast it for free, it enters and adds a mana for you, and then you use that mana to play something with power 4 or greater, draw yourself a card. Just a lot of good value from the Outcaster Trailblazer. Rumor Gatherer is another terrific card advantage engine in this deck. For 1 and 2 white, you get a 2/1 elf with Creaturefall, scry 1. But if it's the second time the ability resolves, instead draw a card. So as long as the Rumor Gatherer is in play 2 creatures and you have a free opt essentially. So you've got a little bit of card selection and card advantage. Now, if you play a 3rd creature, it's going to scry, and a 4th creature, it's going to scry. It only draws the second time the ability resolves. But that's still essentially a free card every turn in this deck, especially after the first few turns. Warden of the Grove is a relatively new card as of the recording of this video from Tarkir Dragonstorm. For 3 mana, you get a 2/2 Hydra, and at the beginning of your end step, you put a 1/1 counter on it. And then, whenever you have a non-token creature enter onto your side, some of the Creaturefall triggers we have in this deck are non-tokens. Most of it's not, but some of it is. Regardless, we've got plenty of non-token creatures, as you can see. But whenever a non-token creature enters on our side, it will endure X, where X is the number of counters on this creature. So that's going to be a positive number after the first turn this has been around, since it gets counters during your end step. Endure means you put a number of 1/1 counters on the creature that came in, equal to the number of creatures or counters on this creature, or you make a token with power and toughness equal to those counters, which is a white spirit. So if you are maybe hurting for creatures, this is essentially doubling the number of creatures you have coming in, because you'll have a creature come in, it will trigger the Warden, you'll get a spirit. You play another creature, triggers the Warden, you get a spirit. Or if you want to make your stuff bigger, maybe it's Ruric Thar, maybe you're casting them for the 2nd or 3rd time this game, and your Warden has gotten pretty big. Ruric Thar comes in, it endures X, maybe X is 3 or 4, and you got a 9/9 or a 10/10 commander. That's alright. Woody Roastmaster, similar to Molten Gatekeeper and Agate Instigator, is another impact tremors. 3 mana for a 3/2. When creatures enter on your side, the Roastmaster deals a damage to each opponent. I like this one. Enduring Courage. For 2 and 2 red, you get a 3/3 dog. This is a good dog. That says, whenever you have Creaturefall, the creature that came in gets +2/+0 and haste until end of turn. Now that can really make things painful for your opponent, especially if it's Ruric Thar. You get Ruric Thar to come in, you immediately have an 8/6 with Vigilance and Reach and Haste that they have to deal with. However, if you're worried about not having good attacks, even with an 8/6, you can always have Enduring Courage on the battlefield and then play Ruric Thar post-combat. So even though they have to attack every turn, they won't be able to attack that turn because you've already passed your combat phase. In addition, Enduring Courage, when it dies, if it was a creature, you bring it back as an enchantment. It just returns to the battlefield. This is not casting it as a non-creature spell, so it won't trigger Ruric Thar and zap you. Enduring Courage is the same cost as Ogre Battle Driver, but it has that death trigger, so better. Also a couple of dollars more, so if you want to go with Ogre Battle Driver, that's also a good option. Next up, Rose Room Treasurer. I really think this is a fun card. It's a 4/3 Ogre Warrior for 4, with whenever a creature enters onto your side, you make a treasure, if it's the first or second time this is resolved. Otherwise, you can pay any amount of colorless mana and have Rose Room Treasurer do that amount of damage to any target. So you play something small or cheap, and you get a treasure. It's not tapped. You play something else, you get a treasure. Again, not tapped. You play a third thing, you've probably depleted your mana pretty well, but you do have those 2 treasures, and you can just have the treasurer zap things. It's any target, so you can go face with this. You can take out one of your opponent's most annoying creatures. In the removal aspect of Rose Room Treasurer is a little bit tertiary, as you can see, because it happens third, but it's not bad, and the ramp is not to be underestimated, because it'll trigger with almost every spell you play. Boss's Chauffeur is another fun new Capenna card. For 5 mana, you get well, technically it's an 0/0, but it's going to come in with a number of counters equal to 1 plus the number of other creatures you control. So basically it comes in and it has a power on toughness equal to the number of creatures you control, including itself. It gets a new counter every time another creature enters under your side, and when it dies, you make a number of 1/1 citizens equal to the number of counters on it. So it just gets bigger. It's just a big, dumb idiot. And when it dies, it's an enormous amount of Creaturefall triggers. Now, it won't trigger things like Warden of the Grove that care about you having non-token creatures enter, but it will trigger everything else that cares about Creaturefall, which, of course, you can see we've got 17 things that do care about that. Boss's Chauffeur is a lot of fun. Soul of the Harvest is a 6 mana 6/6 with trample. When a non-token creature enters on your side, you draw a card. It's a May, so you don't have to. There's also Primordial Sage, which costs the same and is a 4/5 without trample, but it triggers when you cast a creature spell. So it's still a non-token since you don't cast tokens. But I went with the Soul of the Harvest, even though it requires your spell to resolve and hit the battlefield, just because it goes with the Creaturefall theme and it's a 6/6 trample. Who doesn't love Colossal Dreadmaw? We've got Ruric and Goreclaw. This is a 6/5 trampling human bear for 4 and 2 green that gives everything of yours trample. It's one of the couple of sources in this deck for giving everything trample. Ruric Thar doesn't have trample. He should have trample. Ruric and Goreclaw will give it to them. Whenever another non-token creature enters onto your control, you put a 1/1 counter on it, and it gains haste until end of turn. So Ruric and Goreclaw also gives all of your stuff haste, and all of your stuff a +1/+1 counter, as long as it comes in after Ruric and Goreclaw is entered. I really like March of the Machine, so solid include. Finally, we have Thorn Mammoth. Thorn Mammoth is a 7 mana 6/6 with trample, and whenever it or anything else of yours comes in, it fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. Thorn Mammoth is just, does somebody have a creature with power 5 or less? Then Thorn Mammoth essentially says, Creaturefall, destroy that creature. You know, it's a Ravenous Chupacabra or something along those lines. It's not exactly the case because, of course, it does accrue damage marked on it over the course of the turn. But Thorn Mammoth, I mean, I feel like it's pretty likely when Thorn Mammoth is out, every time you're playing creatures on your turn, Thorn Mammoth is essentially kill one of your opponent's creatures every turn, sometimes two. It's a good one. So that is our Creaturefall section. We're going to move on to what I've called the punishment section. So I know you're thinking Creaturefall had 17 things in it, punishment has 12, that's almost 30. We're going to see another section after this, but let's get into these ones first. So we're going to start with the new Thunder Junction Kambal, Profiteering Mare. This guy gives us a good amount of value in the following way. Whenever one or more tokens enter under an opponent's control, you make a tapped copy of each of them, but that only triggers once each turn. So the first time anyone makes any token or tokens on their turn, or on your turn, you get this trigger. And then, whenever one or more tokens enter under your control, each opponent loses one and you gain one. So you get a little mini Kambal trigger, but it hits each opponent. So let one of your opponents make a treasure, you will get a tapped treasure, which will trigger Kambal's second ability and drain everyone for one. This is a like, with the amount of tokens running around these days, I really think Profiteering Mare could be their own commander. This is a fun deck, just not for your opponents. Scytheclaw Raptor is in here to supplement your commanders, to give a little more punishment in the same way that they like to punish things. Whenever a player casts a spell, if it's not their turn, Scytheclaw Raptor deals 4 damage to them. That's not going to be us. We don't have any instance in our deck. So the likelihood of us stealing a spell, I believe, is pretty low. So it's just going to be another way to dissuade people from acting out of turn, so to speak. Veto. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. This isn't much of a punishment. It's something, but it's not that much of a punishment. Veto makes it so every time Kambal triggers, we're getting to double up on Kambal's trigger for someone else. So Kambal is already doing hurting them for 2, and we're gaining 2, which is making Veto trigger and making them lose an additional 2. Or maybe we're passing out that damage or that life loss to someone else. So, opponent A casts Rampant Growth, triggering Kambal, making them lose 2 life. We gain 2 life, that triggers Veto, and we can have opponent B lose that 2 life as well. We've also got an important feature and a little bit of a preview for the next section in Veto's other ability. For 3 black, our creatures get lifelink until end of turn. Kambal is doing life loss. Let's go back up to the top and take a look at it. Kambal causes players to lose life. Ruric Thar causes players to take damage. Ruric Thar is dealing damage. Which means when Ruric Thar does damage, if Ruric Thar has lifelink, we're gaining that much life. So we see our opponent cast that Rampant Growth, let's say. We've got Veto on the board, and we have Ruric Thar as well. Veto, we activate in response to our opponent's Rampant Growth, giving Ruric Thar lifelink. Ruric Thar's trigger is already on the stack because it triggered when Rampant Growth was cast. But when Ruric Thar's trigger resolves, they're going to do 6 damage to the opponent that cast Rampant Growth. We're going to gain 6 life from their lifelink, and then Veto will trigger, and we can have that same opponent or a different opponent lose an additional 6 life. Now, of course, it doesn't loop because that's life loss and Ruric Thar is damage. Lifelink only cares about damage, but it's delicious. And Veto is, for anyone who's played against Veto, they know Veto is dangerous. Arasta is in this because it cares about opponents casting instants and sorceries. It's a 4-mana 3/5 with reach. It's a spider. And when an opponent casts an instant or sorcery, we make a 1/2 green spider token with reach. Now, that's us making a token, so of course it'll trigger Kambal if Kambal's out. But more importantly, it gives us a way to have a bunch of little chump blockers that we don't care about that much. they also trigger Creaturefall for all the different Creaturefall things that we care about that don't require the creature entering to be a non-token. And it goes with the theme of punishing. You know, if our opponents are casting non-creature spells, this is another, obviously instants and sorceries generally are non-creature spells, so we're getting a little bit of a reward for that while they're getting punished. Far Fortune and Boss is a 4-mana 4/5 human mercenary from Aetherdrift. Far Fortune has Start Your Engines, so when it enters, you have a speed of 1, and then once per turn on your turns, whenever an opponent loses life, you will be able to increase your speed, and max speed, of course, is 4. So this is going to happen, I feel like, pretty often. Because why would your opponent lose life on your turn? Because Ruric Thar has to attack every turn, every attack that they're able to. In addition, whenever you attack, Far Fortune deals 1 damage to each opponent. So you're zotting everyone anyway just by attacking, which is something you're going to be doing regardless. And then once you hit max speed, which won't take that long, if a source you control will deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, it deals that much damage plus 1. So this is not a damage doubler, but it's a damage adder, much like Torbran, if anyone's familiar with Torbran. Of course, people are familiar with Torbran. Far Fortune is here to punish people and enhance the punishment that Ruric Thar is doing, because this is dealing damage, not just losing life, which is what Kambal does. Far Fortune is a good supplement for that. We have Aerial Extortionist. I think this is just a really fun card. For a 3 white, you get a 4/3 flying bird soldier. When it enters or deals combat damage to a player, you exile up to 1 non-land permanent. It doesn't say that they control. It can be one of your things. It can be one of anyone's things. You can hit player A and target one of the non-land permanents of player B. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owner may cast it. So really, it's sort of like a bounce. They're not putting it back in their hand, but they might as well be. It's going into exile, but they can cast it with, of course, normal timing restrictions. So if you get rid of their best blocker, then they can replay that creature on their next turn. And whenever they cast a spell from anywhere other than their hand, draw a card. That's the real punishment here. This is not just a removal piece and a repeatable one, even though it is that, and it's pretty good. Whenever a player casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, another player that is, draw a card. So that triggers when people play things from the command zone. It triggers when people play things from the graveyard. Aerial Extortionist is going to accrue you at least a few cards, I imagine. And just by it coming in, it's going to exile a non-land permanent that's bothering you the most. Then it swings in the air, and it's going to get to keep doing that. I like this card. Twin Flame Tyrant may be the most expensive card we have in the deck. Again, there are other cheaper options. But for 5 mana, you get a 3/5 Flying Dragon that doubles your damage. When one of your sources would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent of an opponent's control, double that damage. So this, with Ruric Thar, says, did you cast Rampant Growth? Take 12 damage and lose 2 more life from Kambal. Twin Flame Tyrant, like a few other cards in this, is annoying enough, similar to Scytheclaw Raptor, or even Aerial Extortionist. It's annoying enough that it's removal bait, which means they're not removing your commanders. They're not hitting Ruric Thar. They could go after Ruric Thar while Twin Flame Tyrant is on the stack or is on the battlefield, and that just means you can recast Ruric Thar while they still have to deal with the Twin Flame Tyrant. Or they hit the Twin Flame Tyrant, and they're probably using a kill spell to do that, so they're going to take 12 damage, the doubled amount from Ruric Thar anyway. I think it's all right. In addition, like any other doubling effect, this is a replacement effect. So Far Fortune, if you have max speed, Far Fortune has a replacement effect that says you are doing the amount of damage you would have normally done plus 1 instead. This is a replacement effect, the same way Twin Flame Tyrants is. You don't have to choose, they both apply to the same event. So you get to choose, since you control, you're the one that's, your opponent gets to choose which way they're affected by this, since the person who is affected by replacement effects chooses the order in which it happens. So in all likelihood, you're not going to get an opponent that says, sure, Ruric Thar is going to do 6 damage to me, go ahead and add 1 to that and then double it. They're probably going to double and then add 1. But that's still pretty alright. Being able to go from 6 damage to 13, I don't mind that a bit. Urabrask, Heretic Praetor. This is the second Urabrask from Streets of New Capenna, a set which you can probably tell I enjoy. For 5 mana, you get a 4/4 with haste that has a couple of weird abilities. I'm going to read them, and then I'm going to explain them. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. You may play it this turn. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, the next time they would draw a card this turn, instead, they exile the top card of their library. They may play it this turn. So what this means is, at the start of your upkeep, you exile a card, the top card of your library, and you can play it. So it's basically a free draw, you just have to do it this turn. It's an impulse draw. It is face up, so you're giving away a little information to your opponent, but otherwise it's sort of Phyrexian Arena that doesn't cost you any life. It just costs you information. That's okay. If you're going to play it this turn, there's not much in your deck you're not playing this turn because you don't have any instants. So you pick the thing that you get to see the thing that's gone into exile from Urabrask, and you're likely to play it, and you're likely to get a lot of value from it. As for the other ability, this essentially replaces your opponent's draw during their draw step. So this triggers during their upkeep, but it says the next time they would draw a card this turn. So unless they're drawing something before their draw step, it's going to be the one they draw on their draw step. Instead of drawing it, it goes into exile, face up, and they can play it this turn. So if it's something they wanted to hold on to, they don't get to. If it's something they wanted to keep secret, they don't get to. Urabrask is very annoying. And again, removal bait. It's a 4/4 with haste for 5 that draws you extra cards and keeps your opponents from interacting with you. And if they do interact with Urabrask, that's just going to trigger your commanders. And you're going to know it's coming in all likelihood because they had to cast it this turn. But we have the original Urabrask as well. 5 mana for a 4/4 that has haste because all of your creatures have haste with Urabrask in play. And all of your opponent's creatures enter tapped. So this is not exactly evasion, but it kind of is. If they're playing creatures, they've got to wait a whole turn cycle before those creatures can do any blocking, not to mention attacking. Urabrask is another really annoying card that people are going to want to get rid of. So when they do, they haven't gotten rid of one of your commanders, and your commanders have probably triggered. Fiendish Duo is another damage doubler. For 6 mana, you get a 5/5 with First Strike. If a source would deal damage to an opponent, now this doesn't hit your opponent's creatures, but Ruric Thar doesn't hit your opponent's creatures except through combat. So this is here to double Ruric Thar's triggered ability. And it's a 5/5 First Strike. I don't think that's bad. It also means anything else that slams into your opponents, maybe in the air, maybe because you've been able to get in with things that we didn't expect, tramplers or other flyers, that kind of thing. It's going to double that damage. Again, damage doublers are removal magnets. For example, Gisela, Blade of Gold Knight. Gisela's expensive. For 7 mana, you get a 5/5 Flying First Striker, which is not terrible, that says, if a source would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, that source deals double that damage to that player or permanent instead. So it's the same thing as Fiendish Duo in that way. Also, however, if a source would deal damage to you or a permanent you control, prevent half that damage rounded up. So Gisela's here to protect us and our things, while being a 5/5 First Striker, just like Fiendish Duo. But I want you to notice the way this is worded. It says, if a source would deal damage to an opponent. If a source would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent opponent controls. It doesn't say a source you control. So this applies to everyone. These two cards are great for a little bit of politicking. So maybe player A is in the lead. Now player B and player C, all the damage they do to player A is doubled. So something to point out to people and say, look, you don't have to attack me. We're going to gang up on this person, and if you do, you get a reward of having your damage doubled. And if it's from Gisela, you get that reward, and you also get kind of punished if you come after me. All the stuff that you do is going to be half of it's going to be prevented, and that half is rounded up even. So it's the good prevention. Yeah, and again, a good piece of removal bait, but also a great protection and a good way to do some politicking and, get more of your damage in. Finally, Zoprindel. Zoprindel's another expensive card, but it's a 7-mana 4/6 with reach that is a natural growth. It's costs 2 more than a natural growth, but it's less restrictive because it only takes 2 green in your 4-color deck. A natural growth does this. It's an enchantment that says, at the beginning of each combat, double the power and toughness of each creature you control until end of turn. So Ruric Thar baseline is a 12/12. Now that doesn't mean when Ruric Thar triggers, their power and toughness are doubled, that the trigger is going to deal 12 damage. It's still going to deal 6 because it's not based on the power. But you've got Zoprindel making all of your things dangerous, including itself. It also says, for 2 green Phyrexian mana and sacrificing 2 other creatures, you can put an indestructible counter on Zoprindel. You have plenty of creatures you can do this with. Sometimes you might even want to. We'll find out if there's any form of recursion in this deck soon. Just a preview, there is. So, we've seen our game plan of Creaturefall. We've seen our game plan of punishment. Let's look now at something unexpected. Lifegain. So we've covered a few of these, but I want to talk about some of these non-creature spells, as well as some of the creatures that we're going to be able to get a little more out of from this. We care about Lifegain in this deck because people are probably going to be pretty annoyed by what we're doing with this. They don't want to only have friends, they want to do other things. No, this is a deck of only friends. So we're willing to take some damage ourselves in order to turn that damage fire hose on everyone else, since we have built with our 54 creatures against that. So to protect ourselves and to take away the disadvantage of Ruric Thar triggering on our spells, we have a number of ways of gaining life. For example, Basilisk Collar. Basilisk Collar is a 1-mana enchantment that equips for 2 and gives equipped creature Death Touch and Lifelink. Death Touch is evasion a lot of the time. People love their stuff. They don't want to have wasted playing a creature, so they just won't block a Death Toucher, even a big Death Toucher like Ruric Thar. So Ruric Thar with Basilisk Collar on is going to attack. It's going to do 6 damage to someone, probably unblocked, and you're going to gain 6 life from it. If somebody casts a removal spell or a ramp spell or any other non-creature spell, Ruric Thar will trigger, will do 6 damage to them, and with Basilisk Collar, you'll gain the 6 life back. You'll gain 6 life as Ruric Thar does that damage. If you cast a non-creature spell, for example, Behemoth Sledge, while Ruric Thar is wearing the Basilisk Collar, Ruric Thar will do 6 damage to you, and your life total won't change, because you will also gain 6 life during the same event. That's why we have a few pieces of equipment that give things lifelink. The same way that we mentioned Veto, Thorn of the Dusk Rose, gives things lifelink. That's what it's here for. So we've already talked about Guide of Souls and Elazillicor and Gallic Readers. These are all ways of gaining life. Behemoth Sledge is another equipment for 1, a green and a white that equips for 3 and gives the equipped creature +2/+2 trample and lifelink. So this is a little bit of evasion for Ruric Thar. This is lifelink. This makes them an 8/8. Good times. A little more expensive than the Basilisk Collar, but that trample and the +2/+2 might be worth it. We have here an Assassin's Creed card, Caduceus, Staff of Hermes. For 2 and a white, and equipped for white, it gives the equipped creature lifelink, but also, as long as you have 30 or more life, equipped creature gets +5/+5, indestructible, and prevent all damage that would be dealt to this creature. If you can make this happen, This is crazy. This is just rude on Ruric Thar. They become a 13/13 indestructible indestructible vigilance reach with prevent all damage that would be dealt to it. And all you have to have is 30 or more life. You start with 40. This gives Ruric Thar lifelink. It's crazy. I think this is a really exciting card. And if someone is trying to blow up some of your few non-creature spell cards, this is a good one to do. It's totally worth missing it because it just gives you so much. We've talked about Kambal, so Loxodon Warhammer. In the same basket as Basilisk Collar, this is a 3-mana equipment that equips for 3, gives equipped creature +3/+0, trample, and lifelink. So Ruric Thar would be a 9/6 vigilance, reach, trample, lifelink. Protects you from their trigger. Yeah, we know Loxodon Warhammer. Now, Mask of Grizzlebrand. For 1 black, you get an equipment that equips for 3. So 3 mana equipped for 3, like Loxodon Warhammer. And it gives flying and lifelink. So flying and vigilance on Ruric Thar is pretty good. Lifelink, we already know why it's good. And when Ruric Thar, or whatever creature this is equipped to, dies, you can pay life equal to its power to draw that many cards. I don't know what to say about that. It just works for me. You've spent 6 mana to make Ruric Thar a flyer. It's doing lifelink damage. If someone tries to kill it, presumably with a kill spell, they're going to take 6 damage, lose 2 life from Kambal. You're going to gain 8 between Ruric Thar's lifelink damage and Kambal's trigger, and then Ruric Thar will die, and you can pay 6 of the 8 that you just gained to draw 6 cards. Put Ruric Thar back in the command zone, you're set. And Mask of Grizzlebrand sits on the battlefield, just waiting for you to do it with another creature. We talked about Veto. We have Enduring Tenacity here. Enduring Tenacity, similar to Enduring Courage, the very good red dog that we saw earlier. For 2 black, you get a 4/3 snake that says whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. It's the same trigger that Veto has. But Enduring Tenacity, if it dies, it'll come back to the battlefield as an enchantment and not a creature. Again, this isn't casting something, so you just get your enchantment sticking around that's going to do the Veto thing for as long as you need it to. This is also the Sanguine Bond thing for anyone who's keeping up. So we've got Enduring Tenacity in here in place of Sanguine Bond, since Sanguine Bond is not a creature. Another expensive card, Bloodthirsty Conqueror. Bloodthirsty Conqueror is, if Enduring Tenacity and Veto are Sanguine Bond, Bloodthirsty Conqueror is Exquisite Blood. It's the combo. For 3 black, you get a 5/5 flying Death Touch, Vampire Knight. Whenever an opponent loses life, you gain that much life. So yes, this is a mandatory loop with either one of these 2 things. So an opponent loses life, you gain that much life, you've gained life, it causes them to lose life, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, of course. So Bloodthirsty Conqueror is an absolute must kill for your opponents, which means it's not your commander that's getting killed. Opponent losing life can happen through combat damage, it can happen through Ruric Thar's trigger, it can happen through Kambal's trigger. Yeah, Bloodthirsty Conqueror is very expensive. You could put Exquisite Blood in here, which I think is a little bit cheaper, and just take the damage for it, and it would still probably be a good deal. Anyway, that's Bloodthirsty Conqueror. Finally, Silverback Elder. I really like this card. For 2 and 3 green, you get a 5/7 Ape Shaman that says whenever you cast a creature spell. So that's not the same thing as Creaturefall, but it's close enough. I didn't put it in that category because it's technically not, but it's pretty close. When you cast a creature spell, you get to either disenchant or naturalize, whatever you prefer, so destroy an artifact or enchantment. Look at the top 5 of your library and put a land among them onto the battlefield tapped, and the rest on the bottom in a random order, or gain 4 life. So Silverback Elder gains you life, it ramps you, it removes things. Just a big ape. We love this big ape. Lots of value from them. So, we've talked about our game plan, Creaturefall, Punishment, and then this Lifegain sub-theme that we've got going on here. Let's go into support. So, as I've mentioned before, I use the word draw just to represent card advantage. Not all of these cards are going to draw you cards. So we've seen Sharp-Eyed Rookie, for example. It will draw you a card in the form of creating a clue, so you can get something out of it. Generally, like I've said, I do about 10 of these, but we have so much overlap with these creatures, and so many little kind of key ways of doing it, like Mask of Grizzlebrand requires you to have cast this, equipped it, and had the creature die and paid the extra life. So yeah, it will give you some card advantage, just a little bit of a roundabout way. So that's why I have some extras in here. The first is Garruk's Uprising. This is the only, I believe, non-artifact, non-creature spell in the deck. And it's just because it's good. For 3 mana, you give all of your creatures trample, and whenever Garruk's Uprising enters, if you have a creature with power 4 or greater, you draw a card, and once it's on the battlefield, whenever you have a creature with power 4 or greater enter, you draw a card. So this is a lot of repeated card draw. Well worth the 3 mana and possibly 6 life loss, 6 damage you would take from Ruric Thar when you cast it. Especially because if Ruric Thar's out, when you cast this, you'll take the damage from Ruric Thar's trigger, this will hit the battlefield, and you'll draw a card. So is it worth paying 3 mana and 6 life for something that gives all your stuff trample, gives you a lot of card advantage, and replaces itself? I think so. Lauren of the Third Path is our Reclamation Sage. She costs 2 and a white. She's a 2/1 human artificer. She has vigilance, and when she enters, you destroy an artifact or an enchantment. You're just blowing things up that people shouldn't have been casting anyway, because we're here only for our friends. Also, if you want to do a little bit of politicking, or you just need card advantage, Lauren taps to have you and target opponent draw a card each. We talked about Outcaster Trailblazer. Our Outcaster Trailblazer doing a good job, a good impression of Garruk's Uprising. Rumor Gatherer. And now here we have Svella. Svella we're going to talk a little bit more about in the ramp section, because that's really what they're here for. Svella is 1, a red and a green for a 2/4 Troll Warrior, a snow creature. You can pay 3 and tap Svella to make an artifact token called Icy Manolith. This is a token. Again, we're not casting anything. And the Icy Manolith is a snow artifact. We don't really care about snow in this, so I'll stop mentioning it, but it is cool. It's an artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color, so that's our ramp. If we aren't getting our land drops and we aren't ramping well enough, we can always pump 3 mana into Svella every turn to keep giving us Icy Manoliths. But Svella's in this section because of their other ability. For 6, a red and a green, and tap, we can look at the top 4 cards of our library and cast a spell from among them for free. The rest go on the bottom in a random order. So we've got a big creature, we've got something that we don't have the mana for because we're in 4 colors. Svella helps us there. Now, of course, we will have the mana for it because Svella will probably have gotten us there by the time we have 8 mana to activate their second ability, but still helpful. And again, that's not drawing a card, but it is giving us the ability to look at 4 and cast 1 for free. That's card advantage. Everyone knows Beast Whisperer. 2 and 2 green for a 2/3 Elf Druid. When we cast a creature spell, we draw a card. So this is on the cast trigger as opposed to the Creaturefall. Still important. We have Nylea. Nylea, much like Svella, is really more here for a ramp effect, but her other ability is pretty good as well. Nylea is a 4 mana green god with Indestructible. She isn't a creature until your devotion to green is 5 or more, but when she is, she's a 5/6, and whether or not she's a creature, all of our creature spells cost 1 less to cast. So 53 other cards in our deck cost 1 generic mana less to cast. Hard to say no to that. In addition, she says for 2 and a green, we can reveal the top card of our library and put it in our hand if it's a creature. Otherwise, we may put it in our graveyard. So more than half the time, she's drawing us a card for 3 mana. And if it's something we don't want, we can just put it in our graveyard and try again. I like Nylea. So I went with Timeless Witness rather than Eternal Witness for a couple of reasons. Eternal Witness does cost 1 less, that's true. But Timeless Witness, for 2 and 2 green, you get a 2/1 Human Shaman that when it enters, you return a card from your graveyard to your hand. It can be any card. It can be a land, it can be one of the creatures you had die, it could be I don't know, maybe someone blew up your Loxodon Warhammer. You can get it back. The reason Timeless Witness is in here is because you can eternalize it. So let it die, and then pay 7 to bring it back, and now it's a 4/4 black zombie human shaman that regrowths something the way that Timeless Witness does. The reason that's helpful is because you have several different things in this deck that care about power 4 or greater. So Timeless Witness comes back when you eternalize it, regrows you a card, and maybe draws you a card as well. So double the card advantage. And because you can do it twice, just from casting it and then eternalizing it, that's even better. Next we have Toski. We love this squirrel. For 3 and a green, he's a 1/1 indestructible. He can't be countered. He, like Ruric Thar, attacks each combat if able, so maybe they're buddies. And whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So everything has curiosity. That's going to give you more cards than it cost you. That's great. Aerial Extortionist, like I mentioned, when someone casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, other than you rather, any other player, you draw a card. That'll get you plenty of cards. Now, Timeless Witness gets your things out of the graveyard. Lisa gets all of your creatures back. Lisa is another terrific piece of removal bait. For 2 white, and a black, you have 4/5 Flying Angel with lifelink. More life gain. Lisa says, if a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. So that's a little bit more punishment. I didn't want to put it under the punishment section, but it feels a little bit like it. It's just we're not punishing people for having friends. We're punishing people for not cherishing their friends while they had them. So they're gone forever now. So this is going to hose graveyard decks or reanimator decks significantly. But even better, when another non-token creature we control dies, we put it back in its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. So this is creating a delayed trigger. This triggers when our creatures die. It doesn't trigger at the end step, or rather the delayed trigger will happen at the end step, but this ability on Lisa triggers when the creature dies. So let's say we have all 8 of these creatures on the screen in play and someone plays Day of Judgment. Lisa will trigger for all 7 of these, because this is another non-token creature, at the time they die. And then at our end step, or at the next end step, all 7 of these creatures are going to go back into our hand, with the delayed triggers going on the stack then. Meanwhile, Day of Judgment will have tried to destroy everything, but Lisa will say all those creatures our opponents controlled get exiled instead. So this is card advantage in the sense that when we lose our creatures, we get to essentially redraw them. But more importantly, she just keeps us from having to worry about attacking and, oh no, we lost our creature. We'll just recast it next turn. Oh no, Ruric Thar died. Yeah, but Ruric Thar wouldn't have attacked that particular opponent if it weren't a good trade. Unless, of course, they had to. In which case, they had to. We'll get Lisa back. Well, Lisa will get Ruric Thar back. Either way. So we've talked about Urabrask. Let's talk about Kogla and Yadaro. Kogla and Yadaro, they do a bunch of things. For 2, red, green, we have a 7/7 ape dinosaur turtle. When it enters, you can either give it trample and haste until end of turn, or have it fight a creature you don't control. That's pretty good. That's just a big monster with trample and haste, or its removal. But it's in this section because of its other ability. For 2, a red and a green, and discard it, you can destroy an artifact or enchantment, then shuffle this into your library and draw a card. So it's got a little bit of card draw, and you're not playing it for the card draw. But it's not terrible. It doesn't really cost you a card, because this is going away and... yeah. It doesn't cost you a card, because this is going right back into your library, and then you're drawing a card, so it replaces itself, and it just naturalizes something, or disenchants something if you prefer. Yeah, I like Kogla and Yadaro. We've already talked about Soul of the Harvest. Let's talk about Trumpeting Carnosaur. For 4 and 2 red, you get a 7/6 trampling dinosaur, and when it enters, you discover 5. So everyone remembers Discover from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. You exile cards from the top of your library until you hit a spell that is mana value 5 or less. You can either cast it for free or put it in your hand. So this is casting a spell. So if you were to hit, let's say, Locks on Warhammer, it will trigger Ruric Thar and zot you for 6. But if you hit a creature, of which you have many, you'll be able to cast that for free. So that's your little bit of card advantage there. It's not really a little bit, it's a pretty good amount of card advantage. You might hit Lisa from that, who knows? But also, Trumpeting Carnosaur says you can pay 2 and a red and discard it to have it deal 3 damage to a creature or planeswalker. So that won't trigger Lisa, of course, because it didn't die. But you sure can get it back with your Timeless Witness if you want to. Just a little bit of extra flexibility and removal there if you were to need it to be. So we have covered our card advantage. Let's go to ramp. All right. I know what you're thinking. The first thing you see are 2 spells that are going to get us taking 12 damage from our commander. That is okay. Even in a deck that's all about creatures, Sol Ring is worth playing. It's just that strong. I recommend you look at the EDHREC channel's videos and articles on this. There's just a lot of data that shows Sol Ring is just worth it. It's just that strong. I felt the same way about Arcane Signet in this deck, just because we're running 4 colors and we want to be able to hit all of our spells. We have an awful lot of green in this deck, as you'll see from the color balance in a moment. But Kambal is 3 mana, and we want to be able to get Kambal out as soon as we can, because the earlier you're able to have one of these punishing commanders out, the better you are to hit people's early ramp spells and what have you. So Arcane Signet, if we have to play it later, it's going to hit us from Ruric Thar is going to hit us for it, and it's worth it because it fixes our mana. It's just worth having in here because we may have it in our opening hand or in the first 2 turns that let us ramp a little bit, or at least fix our mana to be able to play whatever we need to play. Arcane Signet's worth it. We've talked about Gala Readers, so let's talk about the Elysian Caryatid. I like this. I like these cards. 1 and a green for a 1/1 plant. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color, or if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, like so many of your creatures, including Ruric Thar, you tap it to add 2 mana of any 1 color instead. Just works for us. Sakura Tribe Elder, it's Steve. It's a 1/1 for 1 and a green. You can sacrifice it to Rampant Growth. That's all it is. So play Steve, comes in, triggers all your Creaturefall. You wait until your third opponent's end step, sacrifice it, Rampant Growth, you're all set. Elvish Rejuvenator is the card I chose of the several different versions of this card to go in this deck. It's 2 and a green for a 1/1. When it enters, you look at the top 5 of your library, and you can put a land tapped onto the battlefield from among those, and the rest go on the bottom in a random order. I chose this over things like Wood Elves, or whatever the other 2 and a green for a 1/1 that goes and finds you that Rampant Growths you. I chose this because this can hit non-basic lands, of which you have quite a few in order to hit to make your colors correct. I know Wood Elves can hit any forest, but I didn't want to build toward a too expensive of a mana base, or too tapped of one. So I felt like Elvish Rejuvenator, with the amount of lands we're running, probably has a pretty good chance of hitting. But of course, if you want to build this deck, you can run something different than the Rejuvenator. I just think Rejuvenator's cool. We have the third Enduring Creature from Duskmourn. For 1 green, we get a 3/3 with Vigilance. It's an Elk Glimmer, and it gives all of your creatures the ability to tap for 1 mana of any color, including itself. And when it dies, again, comes back as an enchantment that's not casting a non-creature spell. Enduring Vitality is a great way to use your creatures that aren't themselves planning on attacking. For example, the Rejuvenator, Steve before you sack him, because you don't have to tap to sack him. Gallic Readers, if you're not attacking with it, you're not planning to block with it, you can use it for mana. Lots of good stuff with Enduring Vitality on the board. Gwyna, Eyes of Gaia. For 2 and a green, you get a 2/3 Elf Druid Scout that taps for 2 mana in any combination of colors, but only for creatures or to activate abilities of creatures or creature cards. So what does that mean? That means that 53 of the other cards in your deck can be cast with Gwyna's 2 mana, and it says creature spells or activate abilities of a creature or creature card. So that's something like we talked about the Carnosaur, the Trumpeting Carnosaur. In your hand, this isn't a creature, it's just a creature card. And it has an ability for 2 and a red, and discard it, you can do 3 damage to something. You can use Gwenna for that ability, even though you're not casting a creature spell with that mana. So that's Gwenna. Oh, also, when you cast a creature spell with power 5 or greater, like Ruric Thar, put a 1/1 counter on Gwenna and untap her. So use Gwenna to pay for a third of Ruric Thar's, mana cost. Ruric Thar goes to the stack, Gwenna untaps, and you get to use her mana for something else that turn. That's great. We've talked about Svella and how good they are. Topiary Stomper. I like this dinosaur. This is another 3-mana rampant growth effect. I thought Topiary Stomper would be better than, like I said, Wood Elves or whatever that elf that I'm forgetting about that rampant growths for 3 mana. This Topiary Stomper has a little bit more restrictive cost. It's not 2 and a green, it's 1 and 2 green. But Topiary Stomper is a 4/4 vigilant dinosaur that rampant growths you when it hits the battlefield. Now, it can't attack or block unless you control 7 or more lands, but you will pretty shortly. And it triggers things like Outcaster Trailblazer and Garruk's Uprising because it has power 4. You can also use Enduring Vitality, if you got that out, to let the Stomper be a mana source. Not bad. We talked about Nylea and Roseroom Treasure and Silverback Elder already. So plenty of ramp going on here. Let's talk about interaction. We don't have much in this deck. I was able to get up to 10 pieces of removal, but they're not all like solid removal or the kind of thing you'd like to use as removal, especially for creatures, which is okay. We just have a lot of creatures. Lorn of the Third Path we've talked about as being Reclamation Sage, and what do you know? We have an actual Reclamation Sage. It naturalizes or disenchants something for 3 mana, and it's a 2/1. Great. We talked about Roseroom Treasure and the Extortionist and Silverback Elder and Kogla and Nidaro, and here's actual Kogla. Kogla is pretty fun in this deck. For 3 and triple green, you get a 7/6 ape. When it enters, it fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. So that's up to, so you don't have to if doing so would be a bad thing for you. And whenever Kogla attacks, you just naturalize something. Blow up an artifact or an enchantment defending player controls. But wait, there's more. For 1 and a green, you can bounce a human you control to its owner's hand to give Kogla indestructible until end of turn. Kambal is human. So you can put Kambal back in your hand, replay him for just his mana cost without having to worry about commander tax, and give Kogla indestructible. You can do that when Kogla attacks in order for you to take advantage of his second triggered ability. Kogla attacks, you blow up something. Oh, someone blocks with something really big. You just bounce Kambal for 1 and a green, and maybe Kogla lives through that Kogla will live through that combat. It may be the case that even that was going to be a good trade, and now it's not a trade. You just have killed something. You can also activate that third ability while the first ability is on the stack. Kogla enters. You've paid 6 mana, and maybe you have 2 more, let's say. Kogla enters. You target the thing you're going to fight. Before that ability resolves, you bounce one of your humans, like Kambal, and Kogla is now fighting and indestructible. Kogla is just a fun card. We've seen Trumpeting Carnosaur, we've seen the Thorn Mammoth, and what we have left is Meteor Golem. Meteor Golem is in this deck not because it's a particularly strong card, and its power and toughness aren't even good enough to trigger Garruk's Uprising or Outcaster Trailblazer or anything like that. It's expensive, but it's colorless, and it can destroy. It destroys a non-land permanent opponent controls. Period. It doesn't matter if it's a creature. We don't have to fight something. We don't have to. We can get rid of whatever we want. So the flexibility of removal with Meteor Golem, I think, is just worth playing in this deck. So that is our removal suite. We don't have any Wraths in this deck. I don't have any board wipes, just because we've got too many creatures to want to be in a situation where, in all likelihood, our board is not going to be, we're not going to suffer most from losing our board compared to other people. That may not always be true, but that's why I went with no wraths. So we have a few other categories that I've coded in here. Evasion. We have talked about all these cards, but I'll just mention it real quick. Guide of Souls and Mask of Grizzlebrand can give flying. Behemoth Sledge, Luxon and Warhammer, Surik and Goreclaw, and Garrup's Uprising all give trample. And Champion of Lambholt just makes your things unblockable as long as she can get big enough. So Evasion is a great way to protect Ruric Thar, because we don't want Ruric Thar getting blocked in a way that is profitable for our opponent. Speaking of protection, we have a few cards that protect us. We've already talked about Caduceus, which prevents damage to equipped creature and makes them indestructible. We talked about Gisela, which prevents half of the damage that we or our permanents would take. But we also have Guardian Augmenter, surprisingly expensive card. I guess not surprisingly, but it's another not cheap card. For 2 and a green, you get a 2/2 Troll Wizard with Flash that gives your commanders +2/+2 and hexproof. So flash this in when someone tries to either block Ruric Thar, let's say, in a way that, like, maybe they block with a Colossal Dreadmaw so that they would trade. Guardian Augmenter comes in, Ruric Thar is now an 8/8, doing more damage. So that little pump isn't nothing. But more importantly, if someone says, I'm going to Doomblade Ruric Thar, well, of course they're going to take 6 damage from Ruric Thar, lose 2 life from Kambal. We're going to gain 2 life from Kambal. Then you flash in Guardian Augmenter before their Doomblade resolves. Ruric Thar has hexproof. Yeah, you're all set. So a little bit of protection. And then one last section of value. We only have Galta and Maverin in here, but Galta and Maverin is a fun, worthy card for it. For 3, 2 green, and 2 white, you get a 12/12 trampling dinosaur vampire. And maybe you never attack with them. I mean, it's a great blocker. It's a great attacker. Don't get me wrong. But the trigger is what matters most. We care about attacking because Ruric Thar has to attack every turn, every combat of Fable. When we attack, we either can make one of 2 things. Either a green dinosaur with power and toughness equal to the greatest power among other attacking creatures. It is also tapped and attacking when we've attacked, and it has trample. So point being, when Ruric Thar attacks, if we choose this mode, we get a tapped and attacking Colossal Dreadmaw. It's a 6/6 with dinosaur with trample. I'm not going to say no to free Dreadmaws. Or, if we want, we can make X 1/1 white vampire tokens with lifelink, where X is the number of other attacking creatures. So if we have a time when we're attacking with a bunch of stuff, and we want to be able to get a little bit of lifelink, or have some blockers, or just trigger a lot of Creaturefall, we get our vampires. And that's what's important, the Creaturefall here. We can get a lot of value from creatures entering, even during combat, thanks to Galta and Maverin. Just a fun card, and one of our few big, expensive 7-mana cards. I know you're looking at the Thorn Mammoth too, so just trust me. All right, let's go to our lands. We've got a pretty simple setup for our lands here. We're looking at 13 basics. We're mostly green and red, so 4 forests, 3 mountains. As you can see, these are both from Ravnica, because Ruric Thar is from Ravnica. And our plains and swamps, of which we have 3 each, are both from Aetherdrift, and the arts are featuring Avishkar, the plane that was once Kaladesh and that Kambal is from. Now, this is not maybe the ideal mix of lands here, but I didn't want to do too few rather, of the plains and swamps, just because we need to be able to cast Kambal when it's time to cast Kambal. All right, we have some check lands. We're running all 6 that we're able to run to go along with our 13 basics. Check lands, as you know, are dual lands that come into play tapped unless you control a land with a basic type that matches the colors of it. So Rootbound Crag comes in tapped unless you have a mountain or a forest. check lands are just a good, relatively budget way to... Oh, wow. I'm just looking at the prices. They are a budget way now. Wow, I like these cards. Anyway, a budget way to keep yourself fixed well. If you want, because these will occasionally come in tapped, you could upgrade these to slow lands, like Overgrown Farmland or Haunted Ridge, lands from Innistrad, Midnight Hunt, and Crimson Vow that only come in tapped if they're the first or second land you've played. So those are in a commander game, much less likely to come in tapped than check lands. We have these two fetch lands. Oh, I've got them tagged as fetch, but they're not really fetch lands. They are fixing lands. So our fixing lands are pretty obvious. Command Tower, of course you're running Command Tower. You're playing Commander, and you got 4 colors. Similarly, Path of Ancestry is Command Tower, but it comes in tapped. And when you use its mana to cast a creature spell that shares a type with your commander, you scry 1. We have plenty of different creature types in here, but Ruric Thar is an ogre warrior. So we've got 4 warriors, one of which is Ruric Thar, so that's 3 additional things. We have 2 ogres, one of which is Ruric Thar, so that's 1 more. Kambal is a human. We have 10 different humans, so that's 9 more. And Kambal is an advisor, which we can see if we zoom out just a bit. Advisor, zoom out a little bit more. There we go. We've got 1 more advisor in here. So yeah, Kambal is providing a lot for us in terms of those humans. So yeah, Path of Ancestry, even if not for all that, it's just another command tower. We want that. Exotic Orchard taps for 1 mana of any color a land an opponent controls could produce. Of course we want that. We're running every color but blue. This is gonna give us at least something that we need. We have 3 little like soft fetches. Evolving Wilds finds us one of our basics. Cabaret Courtyard and Riveteer's Overlook also find us basics and gain us a life. And both of them will find us mountains or forests, which are the things that we're heaviest on. And one will also find a plains, the other will also find a swamp. So that helps us out. And finally, Temple of the False God. I know that some people think Temple of the False God is not a good card. It's a soul land. It gives us 2 mana. When we need to fix our mana, yes, it's not as helpful to us. But once we've got 5 or more lands, having a Soul Ring that doesn't get us zapped by Ruric Thar, yeah, I don't have any problem with Temple of the False God. We're running 2 of these Tango lands in order to help out our check lands. We don't just have 13 lands with basic types. We have 2 Tango lands. They also have basic types. So Tango lands are like those slow lands I mentioned, in the sense that you need to have 2 other lands for them to come in untapped. Tango lands need to have basics to come in untapped. So in all likelihood, these ones are going to come in tapped, but they're going to help our check lands come in untapped. So 2 of these versus the 6 check lands, I think it's worth it. We got 4 of these tri lands. They're all of the ones that we can run that don't have blue. This is the best fixing tap lands that we can bring in. Of course, you can upgrade these with triomes if you're willing to spend the money on that, versus the, at most $1.27 on Card Kingdom for these. And I guess I should mention for the Tango lands, if you really want better versions of lands that are typed, you could upgrade these to shock lands. That would just be fine. And finally, we have our utility lands. We're running 6 of them. So the only one that produces colored mana is Mosswort Bridge. It has Hideaway 4. It comes in tapped and taps for a green. Hideaway 4 means when it comes in, you look at the top 4 of your library, put one face down underneath this, and the rest on the bottom in a random order. And then, whenever you have a total power of 10 or greater among the creatures you control, you can pay a green and tap this, and play the card under that you've exiled with Mosswort Bridge. So it says play. So it might be a land, or it might be a big expensive creature that you're only paying essentially 2 for, the green and then tapping this. Mosswort Bridge is a good include for this. We have Bonder's Enclave. Bonder's Enclave, it gives us draw with Ruric Thar. Taps for colorless. We can pay 3 and tap to draw a card if we have a creature with power 4 or greater. Again, plenty of different things will trigger that, or will qualify us for that, but especially Ruric Thar. We have Demolition Field as a way of dealing with annoying lands our opponents have. Taps for colorless. We can also pay 2 and tap and sacrifice this to blow up a non-basic land of an opponent's. They then may search for a basic and put it on the battlefield tapped, and then we may search for a basic and put it on the battlefield tapped. So we don't actually lose this land unless we've already played all of our basics. We just turn it into a basic of our own. But it'll get rid of... I have a friend in my play group who plays Glacial Chasm. I don't think that's necessary for us to have to deal with, so Demolition Field is our land destruction of choice for that. We have Rogue's Passage, which again taps for colorless, but you pay 4 and tap this to make a creature of yours, or a creature, unblockable. It's not just your creatures though. You can help your opponents out. You can say, I know you don't have any good attacks because of all their blockers, but you can kill them if you swing in unblockably. So I'm going to make your creature unblockable. Otherwise, this is essentially here to protect Ruric Thar. We attack, we don't have to worry about being blocked and losing our commander. So we just make it unblockable. Finally, Vault of the Archangel and Witch's Clinic are both cards that give us lifelink. Witch's Clinic only works for commanders, but it only costs 2 and tap to give something lifelink. So that's a great way to deal with Ruric Thar, even when Ruric Thar's trigger is on the stack. Vault of the Archangel gives all of our creatures lifelink and death touch until end of turn. But of course it costs 2 and a white and a black and tap. So that's 5 of your lands to give everything death touch and lifelink. Might be a little expensive, not terrible though. Obviously, for all of these cards, nothing wrong with swapping these out for something like Surveil lands or Scry lands, or even just more basics. So we've gone through the whole deck. So yeah, that about sums it up. Again, Magic Presents Pride events are going to be happening one day between June 27th and 29th. So check with your LGS for their event and start brewing something of your own. Maybe it's this. 2 are better than 1. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. And remember, magic is fun. You should play more Magic.